Doesn't your neighbor have some?
Okay, we, members of the council and the public, we are now back on camera, and this is for the special work session. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will now convene the special work session of the Burnsville City Council to order, and it is 6:26. And again, our meeting is both in person and online. Council members are present in the chamber along with our staff, and members of the public may attend in person. And if they like, they can also join us on Zoom, burnsville.gov/meetings, on Comcast channel 16 or 859, and also on Zoom, zoom.us/join, or by calling 651-372-8299. More information is available on our meeting webpage and in the council agenda packet. Our work sessions are informal, and we go directly to the item. And so the first item on the agenda is a sketch plan review for the Cub Foods site at 1800 County Road 42 West. And presenting this sketch plan is our, well, it's not Ms. Garros, but our our
Assistant Community Development Director.
Assistant Community Development, Regina Dean. And welcome. So thank you and welcome.
I apologize for that. Deb Garros, our city planner, was unable to make it tonight, so I'm filling in for her. Good evening again. This particular item is a sketch plan. We do have Eric with Kimley Horn. He's actually attending virtually, so if any questions come up from the development side, he can answer. So this particular site, it's currently occupied by Cub Foods, and probably very familiar to all of you, north of County Road 42, south of McAndrews, west of Irving Avenue, and east of County Road 5. So it's bordered by many county roads there. And we have recently re-guided the area to mixed use to accommodate additional redevelopment. And this is part of our Center Village area. It's kind of on the cusp of Center Village. So we're in the process of finalizing that re-guiding. Planning Commission reviewed that probably about a year ago. City Council reviewed and approved. The next step is to take it to the Metropolitan Council for final approval. And we had to put a pause on our action because we needed to complete a AUAR, area-wide urban, I'm going to get the acronym wrong. We had to do some environmental analysis of the area, and so we put the final guiding on pause, but that is in the works. So it will be officially guided mix once we have that Met Council approval. Currently it's zoned B3, which is a commercial zoning district, and it will eventually be rezoned to mixed use. We were approached by the property owner, Sterling, to redevelop the site, and they presented us with two different concept plans. One that's purely commercial, that would meet the underlying zoning that currently stands right now, and one that's mixed use, and I'll go over these in a little more detail. One that's mixed use residential, so has commercial and a residential component. So I'm going to go back to conceptual plan 1, which shows a demo of the existing Cub Foods building completely. It would be rebuilt on the west part of the property and include a liquor store and drive-through pharmacy. And then additional retail would be located on the property, abutting County Road 42, and then in the corner of McAndrews and Irving, and then kind of peppered in other locations as well. Concept Plan 2 shows a Cub Foods in the same location on the west side of the property, includes some of that inline or abutting County Road 42 retail, but then on the corner of McAndrews and Irving shows multifamily housing. And the developer anticipates that could accommodate to up to 240 apartment units, probably similar to what you're seeing around town, 4 to 5 stories.
Yes, Councilmember Keeley.
Is the applicant also looking to make those residential buildings mixed use with commercial on the main level?
At this time, Councilmember Keeley, that is not part of the conceptual proposal. That's something that I think certainly could be brought up as a comment as the developer is seeking feedback on their plan. From what we've heard, they are open to either plan, but really wanted to hear from our council to see what you thought. We had taken this through our internal staff process. We have a development review committee that consists of engineering, fire, planning, parks and rec, natural resources, and we did provide some staff comments, but they said, we want to hear what the council has to say. We want to incorporate some of that feedback into our design and process. So that's part of the reason why we're here tonight.
Thank you. I certainly, from a retail perspective, being in a mixed-use building on 42 is probably the most premium location. I think you could stick a mixed use with commercial on the main level and residential above, because of 42 and all of the retail trade to the east of that. It makes ground floor retail or commercial in those buildings, at least not the entire ones, but the ones that are facing east and even the ones that are facing Cub and 42. So pretty much all but that back leg makes it highly appealing because it's a very heavy retail district to begin with. So the one plan with retail in that corner versus the residential, I'm not the developer, so I'm just saying that's, to me, that's far more attractive retail space in a mixed-use building than maybe even what the heart of the city is, because the heart of the city doesn't have all that density and track record and history of all the retail. 42 is Main Street retail in Burnsville. The heart of the city is Main Street residential and mixed use. But if you want retail, and if you want to be in the best retail position in Burnsville, the A+ spot is anywhere along 42 in this stretch. And so those buildings being mixed use, to me, offer a very attractive option for retail on the main level. But that's the final decision, is truly up to the developer.
Okay, Councilmember Gustafson.
I just wanted to say, I agree that the 42 area is great for retail. I get a little concerned if, and I'm glad you said it's up to the developer to do it. I don't want to force mixed-use buildings to put retail in there in this environment today. I mean, we're seeing some new buildings going up where their retail is not being leased out. And so you have people living there, but the retail sits vacant. And we, even in the heart of the city, we've had that for quite a while. And there's plenty of other retail in this area to do it, but yeah, I would not ever want to force the developer to add retail to an apartment building if that's what they're going to put there. I'd like to see it go up about 10 stories, not 5, but that's another story. I mean,
Yeah, when I look at this, I would like to see the mixed-use development with residential, because any retail would like rooftops, would want people living there. So I also would like to see a more walkable. I don't know, I can't see where the sidewalks would be, but also some green space, which is not shown here. So to put in place a development that really highlights a new space that is walkable and has amenities that would be enjoyed by the residents who would be there. And I see that they have some retail along 42, and that, you know, I can see that they can have more retail along that rather than just a 3, what is being identified. But I think they can certainly increase the capacity there. I don't know whether you look at the parking that is there, whether that's all that parking is needed, but you can take a look at some green space to make it attractive and to have more amenities for the people who would be there, and make it an attractive destination, I would think, for that corner. Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. I tend to agree with everything that's been stated. It would be exciting to see mixed use in that multifamily, but I would lean on the developer and what they prefer. And to what Madam Mayor just stated, green space. I think the multifamily lends itself more to the additional green space than the concentration of commercial. That northeast corner as it sits today is kind of a big patch of green that, you know, we would lose, but you could retrofit back in with some residential and walking paths. And it helps kind of kick off our vision of that area by getting
Yeah.
residential into that area, and then we could see that continue to, creep in the area. So that's my opinion.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz?
I would not place any requests on them once they do the purchase and start developing it, that's their deal. So, yeah, I really don't care. It's all good.
I think they want
Well,
our opinion.
Yeah,
And I get that, but
Yeah.
like this is not, they want our opinion so that their project sails through.
Yeah.
They don't want our opinion because we're expert developers, because we're not.
Make it look pretty.
That's them. Like, they get to develop it, they're the expert developers. As long as what they're doing isn't illegal, that's really it, so.
Councilmember Gustafson?
Well, I agree. I agree with Councilmember Schultz in the sense that I could vote for either one of these projects. I would prefer the mixed-use project with the apartments and all that, but if the developer comes in with something they believe will work, I mean, they're spending a lot of money here, and either one's gonna be a nice project, and to have that neighborhood needs a new store badly. I mean, it really does, so.
Yeah.
But my opinion is, I would like to see the mixed use.
Well, what
Personal
developers want, Sterling owns this, and they're in our community, and they want to work with the community to get the highest and best use. They're developers, they're all over the country, but they also know that a community has a vision. And they know when we put the vision in place for the Center Village, and that whole study took into consideration 42 from 5 to 35W. So they know about all of that. They know about our comprehensive plan. When I was in the development domain, it is about also working in good partnerships. So they are here asking. And I've talked with the folks from Sterling. And so they want to make sure that they're meeting the vision for the city. And so they're presenting two options for us to look at. And it appears to me, and let's be clear so our staff can take it back to the developer, the mixed use is the consensus that I'm hearing. The other is that they should take a look at some green space. And the capacity for retail. Okay, anything else? If not, that's what you needed to hear. And
exactly
they
what I
can
need.
certainly take a look at this video. And everybody should know it's also on YouTube.
Does the
Yes.
developer have anything to say at all, or?
Yeah, pardon me?
Does the developer have anything to say to us
Well,
tonight? I think they've joined us on,
Mr. Keeley is, there's an engineer that's.
what's an engineer?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know if the developer, they're out of Chicago.
They would be available via Zoom if they are online.
Yeah.
And Eric, is there anybody else online? Michelle? No, that would be for another item. And his item's approved.
Yeah. Okay.
Eric is on.
Okay.
He can speak.
From Sterling?
Eric Wilkinsgard?
Representing the developer.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, yes. We just
Okay,
need to
yeah,
see you.
I'm Eric Bokensgaard with Kimley Horn. Yeah, we're just here representing the developer.
That's right.
We helped put these plans together, and yeah, just wanted to say thank you right off the bat for the time. Taking some notes here. Sounds like the general consensus, I agree with you, Ms. Mayor, is that there needs to be some more green space and consideration given to mixed use. So apart from that, I didn't really have anything that we wanted to bring up, mainly just here to field questions that pertain to engineering out here. So apart from that, no, I am pretty excited as well. And yeah, thanks.
Yeah, great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, that's what the Sterling Group wanted to hear from us. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to just go back appreciate the presentation. I wanted to thank him for investing in this particular location. About 5, maybe 6 years ago, a development proposal was brought to our one-on-ones by a previous city manager, and it was exciting to see that it was going to get redeveloped. And then nothing happened because SuperValue ended up selling Cub. So we're delighted that the new owner is bringing a different development, but equally as exciting as the one I saw several years ago, to redevelop that. It's a great project.
Yeah,
Love to
well,
see it. Thank
Sterling
you.
was the property owner back then, and Melissa was the representative from Sterling at the time, and worked with her also on all of this. And, yep, they were just waiting to get better information with the position of Cub.
Right.
And so that's where all of that is, and now we're moving forward. Please thank them for their continuous dedication to Burnsville. And so we look forward to working with them.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council.
Okay, very good. I suppose then you're also going to give us the sketch plan for 3401 and 3427 Highway 13, Par 10 companies.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council again, and thank you for taking these items on such short notice. It's really important that the developers get the feedback from you so that they can make some decisions and hopefully, depending on the situation, move forward with their project. This particular site, many of you know it as either Riverview Center or Mr. B's on the corner of Highway 13 and Diffley Road. It's currently a vacant car wash and gas station, and then a retail strip center that is active. The zoning and guiding on that site is mixed use. We had changed that recently through our 2040 comprehensive plan and then subsequent zoning. So it does accommodate for a mix of uses. It could be purely retail commercial, or can accommodate for housing and commercial activity too. The particular request is to remodel the existing building, to do a facade remodel, and then to demo the existing car wash and former gas pumps, and then to build a coffee location. So similar to like the Caribou Coffee Cabin that we have on County Road 42 in Newton, it would be of similar size. So drive up or walk up, but no interior seating. The developer is requesting to obtain or to request the $1.1 million in environmental legacy fund money that we have available. Now, that does require a city council resolution of support, and then ultimately Dakota County to approve that request. The environmental legacy fund money can be used towards redevelopment, land acquisition, site cleanup, and demolition. So we do have a request to council on behalf of the developer, who is in the audience today. We have MJ Parton, Jerry Truen, and their broker, Chris, in the audience to help answer any questions. But we do want to ask council if there's support for using ALF money for this site, and if you support the sketch plan that you see before you. And then if you do, then we have some follow-up questions for you.
Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. Ms. Dean, is this proposal to purchase the entire lot, the strip and the wash and gas station?
Yes, it would be.
And then the plan is to keep the strip center as is and build a drive-through coffee shop?
So the proposal, should they move forward to development application, would be to do a facade remodel. So change the architecture to add more brick and glass, and then demo the car wash building, the gas pump building, and then to build this coffee house.
Okay. Just me speaking, I don't think that's the highest and best use of the ELF grant. I'd like to see the whole corner get redeveloped in addition to the mall, not just the wash and gas station. I understand that you could probably clean up the mall a little bit, but that's not good enough for me. I'd like to see the whole corner come down and redeveloped. that mall is aged, and I think there's more going on internally than maybe the developer realizes, maybe not. But I am not in support of using ELF grant for this particular project.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I agree. This has been a target site for the council for years. It's been one of our priority economic development areas. And yeah, I'm sure you can take that old building and make it look somewhat nice, but I've been in that building many, many times, and there's lots of challenges to it. And I agree with Councilmember Workman that this site, we always envisioned as being pretty much demolished and something new, highest and best taking place, which would be, I think a lot of us in our view has been more of a mixed-use type project over there all along. And this basically is just same old, and just add a little coffee shop on the corner and you're done. And I would not support that with ELF money at all.
Councilmember Keeley.
I would concur with what was said. That is not what we were looking for, and it certainly doesn't qualify to use ELF grant funding, from my perspective.
I agree. We're looking for highest and best use, not just a facade upgrade, and we don't even know what that means. To take down money, to use $1.1 million of ELF money to, yeah, this is not going to get to highest and best use. And we've had other developers who looked at this, and we can be patient. And we have members of the community here because for years, the folks at North River Hills and Cedar Bridge have been interested in this property and are here this evening because it's important to them as well to see that this property is developed to its highest and best use. So that's why they're interested. This is about our community. This is about what impacts that whole neighborhood on the northeast side of Burnsville. So, yeah, no, this just doesn't do it. Councilmember Schultz.
It will probably not come as a surprise that I do not see this as hitting a threshold for ELF for me. I probably have the highest threshold of everyone, so I'm like, hey, for once I'll be in the majority here. This is great. But I know.
Yeah.
It just doesn't hit that threshold for me of that. I mean, I wish the developer like all the best and in what they're looking at and doing and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to critique their vision for what they want to do. That's their business. I just simply have a pretty high threshold for these types of things, and it does not meet that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really thank the neighborhood for coming because you have been concerned about this property for many, many years. And so thank you for always being there. We appreciate that you care about the community and what we need to, and holding us accountable. So thank you. Does the developer have anything to say? Yes, please come to the
Could the council offer some specificity as to what highest and best use is? And then perhaps also shed some light on, in terms of demand in the marketplace, what is possible to be done or not be done? In other words, we can all say we wish this and wish that. But what is it that meets the test of being able to be done?
Well, I agree with Councilmember Workman, and is that that strip center that you have there, it goes back to the 60s, and we all know the issues of that building. So what he said, and I agree, is demolish the whole area and put in place mixed use, that's housing as well as commercial.
How does that work? Tell me on the pro forma on a housing deal there, with a lot of these, how do you make that work?
Well, we just
My
heard that
friends are
Sterling is going to make that work.
What? But to say we want a certain amount of units and whatever, I've heard there's a tremendous amount of there are absorption problems in all the new units down by the outlet mall. So, I mean, it gets to be an issue again of what is it specifically that your pro forma experience tells you can get done there?
Mayor, if
Yes.
I just may add.
Yes, Ms. Dean.
One of the things that the EDA and the council looks to for guidance is your economic development
Yeah.
tools policy when you're
Yep.
making decisions on how to use ELF funding. So we do speak to jobs, we do speak to increasing the tax base, and additional criteria that I believe this would have this proposal would have a difficult time meeting. And so when you're using ELF funds, one of the tools or policies that you use is that economic development tools policy to help
Yep.
guide your decision.
And, kind of taking it one piece at a time, we've been in a lot of rehab. That building would be totally different looking than it is now. It's not going to be a multi-story building, but in terms of Rambo, you punch it out, you get new surface, you get new glass. It'd be dramatically, totally looking different new building, which is what we think has to be done in order to get tenants. So I think just to say that the building can't be done, that's not accurate. We can make that, it's not gonna be a multi-story, it's always gonna be a Rambler, but there's a lot of those buildings in Burnsville, as there is all over. So the question is to make it look classy, all new surfacing, a lot of landscaping, make that thing, that's a real busy corner, and by your own traffic studies, the traffic count is gonna get up, growing in the next not too many years. With that, we know how to do. But as I say, but what's difficult is just say, do this, but then not explain how that can get done. Because I think on the housing side now, to do a big apartment project there, real tough deal. Real tough deal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. I think you have the council's direction that this is not something that we would use ELF money for, and we disagree with the concept.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And now we move on to the budget discussion. And coming before us is our finance director, Jenny Rhodey. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight's meeting is really a continuation of our discussion, our budget discussions. We met on August 10th to look at max tax proposals, and at that time, council requested additional information regarding franchise fees and looking at possibly replacing the ITF levy with franchise fees. So we've got some considerations and things to discuss regarding that tonight. First, this is just a review as we've, through our discussions over the past weeks and months, we've identified, 4 main priorities as we move forward for future budgets. Really undertaking a community visioning process, looking at priority and programmatic budgeting in the future, addressing staff needs, including, current right-sizing staff, looking at those priorities and service levels that we do through that community budgeting, visioning process, and really addressing staff needs, as well as possibly, looking at a 2-year budget cycle. Over the past several weeks, staff has been reviewing and refining the budget. We have added a new line here. It's that lime green line. Really, we've taken a look at those 5-year averages on revenues and expenses and refined the budget some more. Really, what the result of that is a reduction in the levy increase for that first year in 2022 from 5.7 to 4.8%. And then, out 2023 through 2026 is remaining at that 5.7, that level amount. This is just kind of a snapshot of that, some considerations. With that additional work and the reduction to that 4.8% increase, it really gives us some budget flexibility going forward. Gives us some time to implement plans for host fees once those parameters are finalized. At this time, no policy changes would be required. And it is a predictable option moving forward. This table at the bottom really just is a snapshot of what a monthly increase might look like for a median value home and a $1 million commercial property under this 4.8% increase. There wouldn't be a need for a franchise fee adjustment under this impact. It really just looks at the plans that council has approved and has in place and really stays with those plans and works those plans. As we look at this slide, this is really the facilities fund. This is the fund as approved, really with no changes under that 4.8% increase as we showed on the previous slide. As you look at fund balance and target fund balance, we have a target fund balance goal of about 30% of expenses. And you can see fund balance over the next 5 years is projected to be about close to that target. We do dip a little bit in 2025. Really, that's a result of just the projects that are planned for that year. But as we move forward into future years, we expect that balance to come back to target. But this really is, this is the snapshot that matches, what council has approved with that increased franchise fee from 2019. It includes Ames Center Fund facilities as well as, our ice center, golf course, and some assistance for parks facilities. And it also includes Phase 3 in 2023. So that City Hall, Fire Station 2, and maintenance facility. It includes an estimate for that as well as the financing moving forward. Here's a snapshot of the Infrastructure Trust Fund. This shows the current plan with a levy and a 3% inflation factor on the levy. As you can see, with the current CIP projects that are planned, the ITF right now is well-funded and stable through this 5-year plan. We target about a $2 million balance in this fund, and it is projected to meet that over the next 5 years. This is, as we looked at what franchise fee options might be available, we really, for tonight's discussion, chose maybe two considerations. One being, this is the first one being, what if we increase the franchise fees all at once again to replace what we would need for the ITF levy currently? That's about $3.2 million. So that's about a 65% increase in the current franchise fee that would be needed to replace that revenue. As we looked at what it would, the things we would need to do, we would want to, take some time, really assess those franchise fees and make sure any plan that would be implemented would be, equitable among those customer types. So, I think we'd want to do a lot of work on the front end before we would take any action on changing those fees. We'd want to do some outreach and communication and make sure we're talking to the customers, talking to the utility companies. This would be another large change that they would notice on their bills. So we'd want to make sure we did the proper outreach and communication. And as we looked at timing, really July of 2022 would be probably the earliest that we could implement anything on the franchise fee and really get those collections started. And so as we looked at the financing, half a year would come from this franchise fee. We'd still have to levy for part of the year just to make the ITF whole so that we funded those projects. It does, so in the first year, you'd lower the levy. The second year, you'd take the rest of that levy and lower it again. So you would definitely lower those increases or those property taxes for that in those first 2 years. And then after that, you'd probably have increases again. This is just a snapshot of what that might look like for a median value home and a $1 million commercial property. On the left, it shows the property taxes, the monthly change. On the right, it's franchise fees, even though it does say property taxes, but that right-hand column is the franchise fee monthly increase. And as we put together this scenario, we just evenly increase that franchise fee across all customer types, just for illustration.
Jan, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Hit your button, please.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought this was a work session.
I'll go to Councilmember Gussis and then to Councilmember Keely.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Councilmember Keely.
I thought this was a work session.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Well,
President.
but it's okay.
I hit my button.
Yeah.
And
So-
I just had a quick question about the franchise fees, and we can lower the levy, but does that get placed with higher franchise fees to everybody in the
Yeah.
city?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
Which,
it would be
which for some
increased.
property owners, that might be a good thing in a way, but for others, not so much, like your medium to small commercial and your schools and your churches who pay those franchise fees, and their operation costs will start to go up from all that as well.
Yep, you would have, differing impacts depending on the property types. And, probably the larger valued commercial would feel more of a decrease, right? Because their property tax would decrease more. And the franchise fee is, it's the same across,
Yeah.
no matter what your value is, right?
Commercial's
So-
already going down anyways, and
Yeah.
has been trending that way for quite a while.
Yeah, their increase is very small in
Yeah.
comparison to the residential.
I'm just wondering how far you can go with franchise fees, and, because it also affects your fixed incomes and your seniors and people that are on assistance and
Yep.
that as well, and
Yep.
for them paying their bills.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think if council decides to move forward with anything, you'd want to look at those impacts carefully, because I think it could have, those impacts are going to be felt differently by different properties, or
So
different.
regardless of whether we do those fees, because our cost of doing business as far as infrastructure goes, we'd be constantly adjusting those or levying those plus adding the fees. So we'd have two different things that we'd be doing at the same time.
Yeah.
To offset, correct?
With franchise fees, it doesn't have an automatic, you don't have an inflationary factor, so you're gonna probably have to take a look at those franchise fees every so often. Even if you take the large increase one for this one, you're gonna have to look back and make sure that you're still collecting enough to.
Because our cost of
keep
roads
up
do
with
have an
that.
inflationary factor in them, because it goes up on us all the time.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, Councilmember Keely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Quick clarification point. In your earlier comment, I thought I heard you say something to 65% increase in franchise fees.
Oh, yeah,
to me.
yeah.
What was that 65% referring to?
So if we needed to replace the ITF levy of 3.2 million, we collect, a little over 5 million in franchise fees now. We'd really need a 60 to
gotcha.
65% increase
Gotcha.
in our fees that we
And that-
collect. Yep.
That makes sense. And then in your slide, the ITF replacement has a little blue arrow, circled arrow, creates higher levy in out years. And then down below, consideration, raise or lower, lowers the levy for the first 2 years, then higher. Is the comment about it going higher in out years really the inevitability that the levy always is going to go up because cost drivers are going to drive it up, and it really wouldn't necessarily have to do with this decision?
And your percentage increases are just gonna be higher. You're right, you need to collect what your expenses are gonna be
Yeah,
the same under
right.
both, right? But your levy increases are gonna be higher because your base is lower, so you've.
Oh, increment, yeah, right, you're taking
Yeah.
a piece off of that, so then
Yep.
gotcha, okay. Pretty,
Yep.
that's pretty fractional, I think, because it's a small slice. Okay, and then the last one is, I guess it's a general comment, sorry, not a question for you, Ms. Rhodey. The premise by which the idea has been presented for 15 years, or maybe 12, and recently supported for the last several years by Councilmember Schultz, is to take levy burden off everybody by putting in the franchise fee things that we currently are funding facilities, which we all agreed and did and we're doing, but to also include roads. And actually, Madam Mayor will remember this going way back, and possibly Councilmember Gustafson, way back to the first time I ever suggested this idea, it was actually roads. Even though I love the ITF, and I think it was a very smart financial and budgeting decision by the council back in the 90s to put it in the infrastructure trust fund in place. The actual funding source for roads, I would like to see be under a franchise fee. Now, we ended up evolving the discussion and chose to do our facilities, and I agreed with it 100%. I would also like to bring under that umbrella our roads and take the pressure off the levy. And the other motivation, and I know the mayor will remember this, was I would like to see us eliminate special assessments for roads, which those cities that have, many of those cities that use franchise fees to fund roads have eliminated special assessment. So we're sort of one of those cities that assesses a very small percentage of the total cost. We've cited many times our friends in Edina, and we respect them and love them as our sister city at Edina, levy a very high special assessment on their property owners.
100%.
Yeah, so they get $30,000 invoices when their street gets redone. Ours may see $3,000 or $4,000, so quite a dramatic difference. And those are just examples. That's not what everybody sees. And so the concept is to be able to take this off the levy and put it on a franchise fee funded structure, just like we did the facilities. And I also want to just close out by saying, this is a good example, and I know you're about to go to one that's a little longer amortization, the 15-year, but this would be a 2 6-month period, basically, the back half of 22 and the front half of 2023, to get a full 12-month cycle in. So it puts a tremendous burden to replace the streets and the ITF in one 12-month period, which is why you see these large numbers on the right-hand side. I'm not sure that that's ideal in my mind. I kind of thought of it as more of a phase-in, but that's up for discussion if we ever get to that point. But thank you. This was very, very helpful. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Schultz.
One question I have is, so we have the timing coming in on July 2022, and I think coming in at the mid-year point creates undue complication and confusion. And this could easily be something that has started 2023. I don't think that there's quite a rush to have it coming in during a half year, but I'm open to that as well. That's not a deal breaker for me. And all of the discussion that council had when they wanted to have the franchise fee cover what it presently covers, all is the same as us now saying, well, we're going to add this other category. We're not fundamentally changing anything. This is a matter of degree within the same category. So this isn't a large change. This isn't something new. And many on council argued passionately for that increase in franchise fee to cover those types of items. In looking at what we're doing, we're looking at taking one category and saying, instead of like this small category being in the property tax levy, which not all residents pay into, we're looking at having this then go to the franchise fee. So no funds for this area would be collected through property tax. It would be collected through franchise fee that everybody pays. Everybody in town pays that. And one trend that we have seen on the property tax side is that more of the burden is being placed on our residents and less of the burden as a share is being placed on our commercial and business properties. And that's a trend that's been going on for some time. And that's a trend that we do not see will reverse. We don't see a mechanism or anything that's going to push that reversal. But by placing this into franchise fee for things that are really infrastructure type things that everyone derives the benefit for, that means that as a whole, you have more people as a group paying for this and supporting this. And we're also doing it in a way that's dividing it up a little more fairly between our residents and our businesses. Now, the amounts that are down there, and thank you for that, those are calculated out if we didn't change anything. Like, we're not gonna change anything, we're just gonna make this change and go with those rates. But I think that there is, and I think you alluded to it as well, that staff is really ready to dig into this and say, okay, we probably won't and shouldn't do that because that's not pretty. But what we do need to do is look at how do we do these franchise fees and how do we assess them? And you're also talking about inflationary pressures. And we're looking at going to a 2-year budgeting cycle if that's something that we want to do. I don't think it's out of the realm that we look at these types of things, whether they're property tax levy or, although we have to do that yearly by statute, or any of the other things that we do in budgeting every 2 years. That's what we're going to be doing. So I don't think it is anything. And in a discussion that we had earlier, which was the one-on-one, and I had questioned, why are we saying that it does not provide stability? And the answer was, and I will let our city manager give that answer.
When we talked at our one-on-one, mayor and council, we had said that we think the property taxes, it's the process by which we have historically developed our budgets. The franchise fee is not unstable or it is not uncertain. It's a newer tool that we've been using, and without really understanding a significant shift away from property tax onto ITF, we don't know what that impact would be, or to franchise fees, excuse me. We don't really know what that impact would be. We haven't suggested at this time that we need to reevaluate the franchise fee structure. I think we did that when we adopted it in 2019, and from a staff perspective, that's working as intended or as designed. If the council wishes to make a shift away from property tax and more onto franchise fee, it does need significant analysis to ensure that it meets the goals that have been identified by the council. I can't sit here today and tell you what the impacts are going to be. So I think long answer to your question, council member, but I think that was kind of the overall package that we talked about earlier.
Right, exactly, and I do appreciate that, and that's also why I think the timing for me might be different for other council members. The timing for me doesn't necessarily need to be July 2022. I would like to hit the mechanism at the same time as a budgeting cycle. I just think it would pair better, but I will also defer that to staff suggestion on that as well.
Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. After having some time to kind of work through this, I'm not a huge fan of an ITF replacement with franchise fees for a few reasons. I just think it creates more volatility into a system that's supposed to be fixed for an ongoing time. We just raised these, looking at road construction projects. I don't know that you can plan those the same way you can plan out facilities projects. There's a lot more volatility in those. I don't want to be up here having to discuss a property tax levy and a franchise fee increase simultaneously, where we're talking about increasing two taxes at the same time. When we look at property taxes, fundamentally, people expect those to pay for roads, bridges, police, fire, and water. So it, to me, logically makes sense that roads stay in that box. And the last part that I'll mention, actually, I think I already just mentioned it. I'm not thrilled with this idea. I didn't like the last round of increases, and I don't like the prospect of having to come back to the well, whether it be 2 years or 4 years or every year, to adjust for changes in road construction projects.
Okay. Councilmember Gustafson.
I just want to make a quick clarification. Actually, if you live in Burnsville and you rent or own, you pay property tax.
Those are not the people I'm talking about.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, you said
It's the
something to
people
that
who by
effect, is the
federal
way
law
it came
don't
out.
pay.
But everyone pays a property tax. It's in your rent, it's in your lease, it's there.
I remembered
Not
what I was
everybody.
gonna say.
Not
By
everybody.
federal law.
Oh, you mean like the nonprofits and the churches and the schools? Are you talking about?
Yeah, everybody
Okay.
that uses our streets.
Okay. On the, okay.
Can I squeak one quick thing?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, if you live here, you pay property tax, so don't, anyone will tell you, you don't unless you're a nonprofit or you're a church or your school.
Okay.
There-
Councilmember
There
Workman.
might be people that know this better than I do, but this is what I was trying to remember. The franchise fees as a whole across the state, I think, are being looked at very closely by the state right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There.
And so I also don't know how wise it would be to implement a change like this on something
Yeah.
that could be taken away by the state, and then we're having to panic and readjust all of this on the fly. That's what I was trying to dig out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Schultz.
So we already do a franchise fee. Like, we already do it. So if they take it away, we are going to have to scramble. Like, that ship sailed. As far as raising two taxes versus one, we're still raising taxes. Like, the amount of money we're asking from people because of our budgeting process, like, if I say to you, you're no longer going to pay $80, we need to get $100 from you, does it matter if it's $80 by check and $20 cash? Because that's what we're doing. It's not that we're putting an additional tax on people. There's no additional money, except for a few cases where people don't pay property tax. That's not going to be increasing. What it does is it does bring in some people that normally don't pay as much because they don't pay property tax into this. So it does spread it out a little more, not a lot more, but it does spread it out a little more. And it does so in a way for things that everyone is using. And I can understand if you say, you know, roads, police, all that kind of stuff, that's a basic function, and so that's okay to use it by property tax. But, I mean, make no mistake, we're gonna jack up taxes every year. So whether you're voting for a levy increase or you're voting for a franchise fee, don't kid yourself that we're not gonna raise people's taxes every year, because we are.
Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In 2017, I'm on, in case anyone would like to know, Institute for Local Self-Reliance. In 2017, 60 cities in Xcel Energy's Minnesota territory alone assessed franchise fees. And since 2017, if you look in the news or just Google search, you could see cities in the metro are actually looking to add it. It's becoming a very, very popular, which is probably drawing the attention of the state to look into it. But it is very common. There are 40 states around the country out of our entire U.S. that allow franchise fees. It's clearly the more dominant, more popular revenue option than not, right? There's a handful, there's like 2 states, I think it's Wisconsin, ironically, our neighbor, and Maine, that flat out don't allow them. And then there's about 8 or 10 other states that, 8 other states that allow a certain mix. But It's interesting to see, there's actually, in this particular article from 2017, there's a sample of some cities and what rates they charge, and we're not in here, and I don't know if ours was ready in 2017 when they wrote this, but it is it's clear that what Councilmember Schultz and I are advocating for is, if we're going to raise taxes every year, is there a path for core function infrastructure buildings that franchise fees can play a part of, and to lessen some of the burden on the levy, because everybody uses our roads. Maybe everybody uses our water, everybody uses our septic system. I mean, there's a lot of that infrastructure that everybody uses, no matter if you're a nonprofit or not. And so paying something toward maintaining that seems logical and fair. And obviously, this has clearly become a popular tool in 40 states by many cities, and 60 just in Excel's back in 2017. It's probably over 100 now, to use this particular revenue tool. I will go back and close out with just citing the example that I asked for many years ago before we put the first franchise fee policy in place. Because I said, I really would like to know how much of a shift of the burden is it? And the staff did the work back then, and they basically snapshotted a given time and said, okay, based on all of the properties at the time and the value and the actual property tax levy, for every dollar that you increased the franchise fee, or at that point it was like if you instituted a $1 per meter, the levy would have a $1.40 pressure reduction. In other words, a property owner would save $1.40 here with a $1 increase over here. And the difference of that, and that was on an average property, and they did cite, I think the chart had 5 different property classifications, valuations, and then commercial. And really, I was more interested in the residential, and to Councilmember Schultz's point, I'm even more interested in the residential comparison because the trend has been for quite a while, and it appears based on housing shortages, supply chain problems, and labor, the value of houses continues to escalate at a phenomenal rate. So the housing market in Burnsville is going to continue to take a larger and larger burden of the property tax based on how we assess it. And so if that $1.40 is anywhere near what it, today, if we did the exact same evaluation and maybe it's $1.35 or 32 or 48, whatever, but it's probably within that same ballpark. And maybe it's more because of the residential switch. That's what I'm looking at, and I would compliment Councilmember Schultz and how she put it. We're going to raise taxes every year because we have to, because the cost of government is just like a business. The costs go up, and if you have 2 tools in your toolbox, property tax and a franchise fee, how can we use both of them to most effectively control costs and spread the burden of the cost of running a city? I'm heavily in favor of these types of things like the infrastructure in our streets, putting that on 100% of the users rather than the ones who federally are required to pay property tax versus those who have an option not to pay property taxes. And more power to them, that's fine, but we're not putting the entire cost of the city on 100%. We're just putting the things that we know everybody uses. And I think it's fair to say, if you use the streets and the water and the sewer and even public safety, you should be paying something towards that. That's my argument. Thank you.
Councilmember Workman.
The only last thing I wanted to say is when we raised these last time, it was under the precedent that we were going to raise it and then kind of bookshelf it for a while. And I understand this is a new idea. My concern is having this exact same discussion annually with a franchise fee next to a property tax levy. So I understand that, to Councilmember Schultz's point, $100, it doesn't matter which cup you take it out of. To me, we're adding an additional conversation of taxation and collection into the mix that was sold as a set structured fee that was sold to the citizens of Burnsville and the community of Burnsville to pay for our buildings so that we didn't have to levy for them. And I understand and I appreciate everything that we've talked about with regards to streets and roads being applicable to that. But in my head, those are a lot more volatile than planning, you know, your 20-year roof replacement. Those have bigger swings that I think are gonna bring us back to this table and be having more discussions about 60% increases to flat fees as opposed to, you know, points of a percentage that we're talking about on the levy. And I'll just leave that.
Councilmember Gustafson.
I think it's important to note that, yes, you're right, we raise levies every year, and the levy does not equate to what you actually pay in taxes. And if we do our job properly and we expand our tax base and create opportunities in the city, we can actually mitigate the impact of those levies. But we have to levy, though, I mean, the way it works, you guys know how it works, but for the public is, we have to levy for what we need based on what's going on in the city, and that doesn't mean, so the more people are paying, the other buildings that are there and this and that can help mitigate what an actual homeowner is gonna pay in taxes, so. I don't like using the word, we raise taxes every year, we raise the levy every year, and it may be a small increase in taxes, but they're two different items, and it's important that people know that. You can say it's a 5% rate increase, but it might be a 1.5% actual impact on the property owner themselves, and that's just important to get out there.
Yeah. Councilmember Schultz.
And it is a good point to bring up that when we're looking at, and we had this discussion again the last time that we raised the franchise fee, and one of the reasons why this council voted in favor of it was if we raised the franchise fee to pay for this category that we needed to fund, we needed to take less money from, you know, when we taxed. So it was instead of taking $1.30, we'll take $1. So my question to council is, if that is true, why would we not do that for something like roads, which I don't think has volatility, because those are planned out. We don't just, like, Ryan doesn't randomly pick roads each year and just say, this is what we're doing. There is a plan, and it is a lengthier plan. It's not a 20-year roof replacement, but it is a lengthier plan, and it is carefully planned out what we're going to be doing. Also, they have an area of budget that they look at and say, this is what we have and this is what we can do within it. And sometimes that means that they get a good price on something and they're able to get a little ahead. And we saw that last year happily, which was good. And sometimes prices go up a little bit and they're like, okay, we'll need to bump this particular project. And that's pretty normal. So I think there is a great deal of planning that can be done. I don't think that there are wild swings, and I have not historically seen wild swings when I've looked at our road budget. The only time I really saw a wild swing was when the city entered that budget crisis in 2009. And that was, there were a fair number of things that had to be shelved for a few years, and it's taken us a while to get back out of that. So, but that's a pretty rare thing, and that would have hit us whether that was property tax. It wouldn't have mattered the funding mechanism. Like, we got hit, everyone got hit. That's how that was. So if we can switch to a different taxing method for a small area that can be planned for, which causes us to take less tax money in total from our residents and businesses, I think we should at least look at it and look closer into it.
Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you. I think we're just
Are we beating this to
having,
death?
well, yeah, and I think
You
it's
know,
just
and
a
I'd like to
good,
speak
open
to all of
discussion.
this.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Do you want me to take my button off so you can?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that in increasing the franchise fee the last time, one of the things I was expecting to happen was a significant reduction in our levy. And it wasn't until after I started to look at the whole picture and I realized why we didn't. The big increase in the franchise fee came where we had already identified very big expenses to fund. Fire station number 1, and in the future, fire station number 2, and City Hall. So it's almost if we think back and said,
Yeah.
maybe if we'd have left the franchise fee at the original amount, which is $1 for home, $1 for home, and $5 or whatever it was or the various tiers for commercial, right? And we'd have not touched that. And we would have taken on the Fire Station 1 and these others in our plan, our levy would have significantly more pressure than that would today. And all the parks and the Ames and all of these facilities, we wouldn't have been able to fund with the buck and the commercial rate all of what we're doing. So we would have been forced to say, well, if we want to do those, we're going to have to really raise the levy a lot to be able to accommodate those. So we did see levy pressure removed, but it never really materialized in a drop. We didn't go, oh, look, we were at 5 and now we're only at 1.5 because we instituted a franchise fee. We created needed reasons. We didn't create. We had very significant needs that needed to be addressed. And that actually, I think, factored into our decision. I think this council made that move to go forward with that increase in the franchise fee because we knew we needed a new fire station and we knew we needed to fund it. And we also recognized that the franchise fee was going to give us more revenue and take some pressure off the levy. It's difficult in these times when you make those types of adjustments to see the desired end result as far as, quote, a lower levy, because there's just so much, there's so many other things going on, like a pandemic and lost revenues and one-time money and a lot of shifting and managing turbulent times. So we probably would almost have to have a document in front of us say, if you did everything that you wanted to do and you left the franchise fee, here's what your levy would have been. But because you put it in, you increased it, it was a big increase, but here's now the benefit to the levy. We didn't really go through that exercise. It just sort of happened in the numbers. Thank you.
Councilmember Gustafson.
One last word on this subject, and I'll stop. I promise. I will tell you that I look at our infrastructure trust fund, our water fund, the utility fee, and every one of them, in my mind, is an escrow account for what we're planning for, what our priorities are in the city in the future. And sometimes, you're right, the utility fees got some money in it right now, but we also are aware that going out over the next few years, that money is going to get spent, and that money is going to be used to, when we have to bond or things like that, for a funding source for some of the bonding we do. And that will stop us from having to raise taxes or levies to fund it, because we have funding mechanisms in place. The one thing I've always been really proud of our city is, and it started well before I got here and you got here, Dan, is we plan for the future and we escrow for the future. We invest in ourselves. And if you start taking from, just like your home, if you start taking from your escrow to do other things, it could cause you problems down the road when it's time to pay those taxes, or it's just like a business, Dan. I mean, the business knows it needs a new roof in 5 years. It doesn't wait 5 years to say, oh, we better find some money. It starts doing things toward that. And we're doing that in the city right now. And so messing with those funds, I don't really think is good policy. It took us a long time to get all these funds in place. And quite frankly, I voted for the franchise fee because it was going to handle all of our buildings. We weren't going to have to go back to our citizens and say, oh, we need a new roof, or we need this, or we need to build that. The money was going to be there so that we could just take care of it. And I just think that's just, it's good policy. And with that, I will leave it alone for tonight.
Sound like you were justifying the switch to franchise fees with
No,
that
I wasn't
statement,
justifying.
because,
No, I wasn't
like,
justifying.
Isn't roads the same thing?
No, I was saying, don't mess with what's working is what I'm saying. We got escrows that are actually working for us right now. And you do see
This wouldn't change that.
less pressure on levies because some of these funds are working for us.
Councilmember Schultz.
But this would not change the escrowing. That money would still be going into the account on a regular basis. What we're talking about is money coming in quarterly rather than twice a year. That's it. And being able to have the same amount going in there, but taking less from our residents, taking the dollar instead of the $1.30. But you end up with the same amount, the net same amount, going into the escrow. So if we could do that, even like a tiny little portion of our budget, and take the dollar rather than the $1.30, and still net the same amount in revenue, I see that as something that might be something to look at further.
I'd like to respond, but I said I wouldn't.
Yes.
Oh, I could, but I won't.
No, the Madam Mayor has the last word.
There's a lot of discussion around how we fund our infrastructure trust fund. And we're looking at our franchise fees. Franchise fees was put in place so that, and we said this to our people, our residents and our businesses, that it would fund the facilities that we have. And these facilities have not been improved. Well, City Hall since 1982, when this building, 89. And then we did police, and now we're doing Fire Station 1. And we told our people these were things that were needed, and that the mechanism for us to get there, because everybody needs all of these services, these assets belong to them, is the franchise fee. We talked with the utilities and so forth. They approved that, majority, not everybody, but the majority. And as we evaluated all of the assets that needed to be improved or needed to be developed, we made a big decision to increase the franchise fees to meet that. And we said we wouldn't do it again. So from my perspective, we can talk about how all of this is going to work out and the two buckets, the property tax and the franchise fee. What I don't want, because I don't know if any of you got phone calls, was mostly the phone calls I received from businesses, and I think staff also received phone calls from businesses when we raised the franchise fees. And they did not like that jump. And I said to those that called me, is that we're doing this once and we're not doing it again. Our infrastructure trust fund is in place for our streets, and we have the property tax that will pay for all of the basic service, what you expect of us. But these are buildings that you own, the public owns, that we need to, we're stewards of these assets. And they didn't like it, but they did. Now, I can tell you that Darlene Miller is not going to like looking at this and saying, you told me that you're not going to raise this again, and all of the other businesses that have talked to me. And I know staff, you received a whole lot of phone calls from the business community. More so, I think, than the residential. I think I only had one or two from the residents. But all of the phone calls I got was from the business community. So from my perspective, as it has already been mentioned by Councilmember Workman and Gustafson, these funds are working for us. The Infrastructure Trust Fund is working, and we do have a capital plan that's 5 years out. The rating agencies look at this, and we have it in place, and it's transparent, and they can see that. The facility, the franchise fees for our facilities is transparent. They can see how we're going to be using it. And the general fund, everything that we fund throughout the general fund is transparent. So from where I sit, I agree with Councilmember Workman and Gustafson that we leave the Infrastructure Trust Fund as is and the franchise fee as is. I'm not going to go back on what I have said, and all of us have said to our businesses and residents, we're taking this one-time increase and we're going to leave it. Because the other thing is that when you look at the money that's coming in on the franchise fees and you look at all the projects that we have to do, we have all of the bonding from police that we have to pay for, that out of the franchise fees, Fire Station 1, and then we have an estimate for City Hall, Fire Station 2, and the maintenance building of $26 million. When you look at that debt service that the franchise fee is going to have to address, you know, that's a lot there. And police department doesn't come off, that bond doesn't come out at 2035, am I correct?
I think so. It's very close. It
It's
might be-
around?
Yeah, it might be 2032,
Okay, I'm in the
but
ballpark.
it's in that ballpark. I think I think that one is 15 years.
Okay, so, you know, all of this has been bonded for, and so the money is there, and we have to pay all of these bonds, and it comes out of that franchise fee. So for me, with all the work that our staff is doing, to direct them to do more work when the Infrastructure Trust Fund is working, the franchise fee is working as to how we said that it would be. And we continue to take care of what our people have said to us they want. We just saw the survey from the people. They expect us to deliver services to them. And so we need to continue to do that. This is what our people are saying to us. So to staff, I thank you for all the work that you're doing to try and address because you're receiving two messages from the council, and that's confusing. But I think we need to look at what is the consensus of the council, and so that there's clarity, City Manager Lee. And, Councilmember Keeley, you're up to rebut.
I don't want to rebut. I just want to point out that the city of Prior Lake is currently in discussions proposing to adjust their city franchise fees to help fund the maintenance of city streets at necessary levels. And residential property owners would see a small increase in their monthly gas bills. So they have one now at $1.50, and they're raising it to $5 for residents to actually put towards street
That's
maintenance.
right after what we've done.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
if
we
we're
chose
gonna,
to do
if we're gonna
facilities,
do
that's
any
okay.
of this, I'm going to want to say, you know, the business community and the residents need to be a part of it. We're gonna make a shift, engage the business community, because I've heard from them since the last increase. Staff has heard from them, and I said we weren't going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it
Yeah,
again.
I would not advocate, and I think in my one-on-one today, it was pointed out by Ms. Rhodey that it would be difficult to be able to get it in for next year, but maybe it's something we
Or
talk
the
about for the
following
following
year.
year where we have more time.
And
to
I'm
work
going
it.
to make sure that those businesses come and fill this chamber.
Sure, and let's make sure we tell them what the benefit is and that they're lower levy, because we.
Well,
we're
they're
asking for
already,
it.
we should take a look at all of that with regard to commercial, industrial levy and what the residents are paying. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Councilmember Schultz. We're debating this, but we are making no decision.
There is
Good debate.
no one in this discussion that is saying that we take money away from police. That is not part of this discussion, or that we won't take care of the other obligations. That is in no part of this conversation, and I don't think anyone has brought that up. As for having the business community involved and all that kind of stuff, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this discussion to continue so that we can engage our community in this discussion rather than take a short look at it and just kill it without looking at it further. So, like, I'm the one that actually wants to have our business and residents engaged in this conversation and to keep the conversation going on this. Now, and I think that would be fine. I also know that one of the things that is looked at as a negative on this one is that when you raised the franchise fee, people contacted you and said, what is going on here? What is this about? And to me, that's a feature, not a bug, because that made it much more transparent, and people could see that in their bill. And having those discussions, that's exactly what we should be doing. Having these types of discussions with our residents, having our residents active and involved and wondering, what are you guys doing? What is this funding mechanism? What is it going to? How are you spending this? Like, to me, that's a good thing. And so I would absolutely welcome those types of discussions, especially when we can tell them, yes, we're looking at switching to this funding mechanism because we won't need to take as much of your money to be able to do the same things. We would be taking less overall of your money to do these things. That's a conversation I'm happy to have all day, to be able to say, yeah, instead of taking $1.30, we're going to take $1.
Well, Councilmember Schultz, Burnsville has, since I've been in office, have been civic engagement has been a priority, and our citizens have always been a part of that process. And we're going back out and engaging them again to look at what is important and what the priorities are for them. So none of us who have sat on these seats on this dais have said, we don't want to talk to our citizens. We want our citizens involved. If things are going to happen in their neighborhood or if it's going to impact them, we want them involved. And that has been part of all of this. The Infrastructure Trust Fund and all of that has been part of the process here in Burnsville. Do we go for a one hauler in the city? 3 task force taking a look at one hauler for all of that. The citizens are talking to us about that.
Don't talk about that.
But the thing, but the thing is, we do engage our community, and it's a discussion we all always want to have, and they have helped us in all of this discussion. But right now, I think our staff is wanting to understand, we're going to move forward with the ITF as is and the franchise fee as is. And there is a consensus to move continuously in this direction. We'll have probably more discussions about these funding mechanisms, but not now, and not to confuse staff as to what they should be looking at or not looking at. So, Ms. Rhodey, is there anything else you want to do with this? Or are you looking for the max tax?
I think a couple things. I have one more slide we can just quickly talk about.
Sure.
The second option, and it really was just a longer term option on the franchise fee. I won't go into a ton of detail, but.
You don't want to start that conversation again.
Yeah, because, I'm going to have every one of them having but we need to, yes.
But it would be the same prospect, it would just be over a longer term, and really taking a look at franchise fees probably every other year, looking at raising them a small amount. until you had full replacement, which is probably more of a 10, 15-year prospect. So that is an option too. I think that's aligned to a lot of what cities are doing right now. They're doing smaller, regular increases, so that's an option as well. Just didn't want to miss that, but
Yeah,
if there's any questions, I can answer
yeah,
those
yeah.
too. But I think that, and then, getting some clarity on max tax for our preparation of the resolutions for the September 21st meeting. So, that, which is here.
Okay, council, we need to direct staff on the max tax.
Yes.
Yeah, Councilmember Workman. Councilmember Schultz, you have a comment to make?
I do. So looking at the max tax, and I do appreciate that you have greatly reduced it from what was originally proposed. I do appreciate the hard work that staff has done to decrease that. If you could go back to probably, I think, one of the second slide in this, and it showed the pathways.
Oh, yeah. I think I can. Oh, no. Good thing I don't have very many slides.
There we go. One thing I do want council to have consideration of is, okay, so we're looking at our max tax, and looking at that green level, which is the 4.8, and then looking at, it's more of a flat 5.7 as it goes along. But one thing I do want council to keep in mind on this is, we are discussing bringing on more staff. And those costs, since it is not a done deal, are rightfully not placed in there. So when we're looking at what we're levying, I will be very surprised if we are on that green line. And that has nothing to do with what staff has done or anything like that. It's going to be what this council votes for. And so I do want people to keep that in mind. And since we're going to use a higher funding mechanism where we need to take in more funds from our residents to net out the same amount that we would need in our budgeting, I mean, we're going to have continuous upward pressure on our levy. We just are. So I am appreciative of how far you got that down. And thank you to staff and the hard work. But no, I will not be voting in favor of that.
Councilmember Gustafson.
I have a question, the 4.8 versus the 5.7. I know you said earlier, we're not talking about not funding police, and we certainly don't want to do that. But I also know that we're doing safer grants, and I want to know.
Exactly.
I
And
want
a
to know
COPS
if
grant.
that 4.8, that's going to fund the operational part of that going forward, or if the 5.7 is going to fund the operational part of that police.
Those are not included in here.
Okay. So we'll be having that discussion down the road.
Yeah.
Fire.
And so,
Yep.
so the lower we go, it's quite likely, the
safer,
higher we're gonna end up going once we
COPS
start
is
hiring staff,
police.
correct? It's
You
not a
know,
trick question either.
No, no, I mean, it kind of depends on what the I guess the level of staffing, but yeah, you're gonna need the same amount, it's just a bigger percent of what you're currently.
One of my concerns is, and I'm gonna go back to the police department, and I know it's near and dear to the hearts of pretty much everyone at this council. The behavioral unit has started. We pretty much told our chief, yeah, we think you need to have a social worker there, you probably need some more officers, so we support that happening. We're looking at the SAFER grant coming in at some point. We'll have that for a year or two where it's paid for, but then we have to pick it up. And so how do we account for that as we're going forward? 3 years, is that what it is?
Is it 3 years?
But how do we account for that going forward? so that we're gonna get back to the silos in a way, where we're preparing ourselves for that, where we maybe have something that's slowly ratcheting up, so that we know, as we're hiring the staff, which we need to do, in this era of economic development, we have all kinds of things that have to happen, and you guys got an inadvertent email from me the other day, going out to a developer about just our inspections and that, and,
Right.
you know, we have a plumbing inspector, we have a electrical inspector, that's it. And we have projects going like crazy in town, and that's not stopping anytime soon. I just talked to Regina before the meeting tonight, and she said they're nuts back there. They have people all over them. So we're gonna be hiring people, and I'm trying to figure out how do we, I know, it's so tough, because you're trying to keep the taxes in a level where our residents can stand it, and our commercial properties can stand it, but we also have to think about our future, and how do we plan for that, and how do we put things in place that's gonna help us pay for that, so when the time comes and we need 2 inspectors or 3 officers, that we can do it. And I'm not sure that any of these actually hit that mark either, to tell you the truth. I was hoping the 5.7 would at least pay operationally the cost of our police department with the SAFER grant. If we were to come in at 5.7 now and not go down.
Councilmember Keely.
You want to answer that?
I didn't get an answer
Well,
yet.
I mean, I think we have estimated, I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to know approximately what the operational cost is, and if you divide what, you know, over the next 4 years, that city
Yeah.
share, to operationalize that, if you were going to divide that evenly
Yeah.
among the years, I think it's, 209,000 for the personnel costs
Okay.
annually.
Okay.
You know, if you started
Yeah.
evenly just levying,
Yeah.
it starts lower and increases in the later years, so if, you know, that's,
6 or
but,
7 tenths of
So it's a-
Yeah.
Yeah,
percentage.
because we have to fully fund it at the end of
Over
the,
half.
of the grant.
At the end of the grant, we have to,
Yep.
we have to
We
be
have to
funded by then.
fully grant, yeah, and we can plan for that. We've done this before when we had COPS grant and SAFER grants. So we can do that, but it takes a lot of planning and a lot of work going into it. So, you know, our staff, smart people, they have done this. The thing is, we need to make sure that our citizens are saying, this is what we want, and we need to give them the tools to deliver the expectations. Councilmember Keely.
Thank you. A question I meant to ask, forgot to ask in our one-on-one today. In this new proposal that has 4.8 this year, we talked about it, but I forgot to ask the direct question. Are the roughly 700,000 in host fees embedded in this forecast?
no.
No.
Not
Because
yet.
until that contract is in place, we can't count for it.
Yeah, we have not counted on that yet, so that's something we still have time to think about
Yeah, is that-
and look at how we want to use that.
That's phenomenal news, because that means you went from 5.7 to 4.8 without factoring in. And I know that would have been a bigger swing, but I just thought maybe there was a partial in there. So if I may ask, what is the cycle for that particular agreement to get it in place?
We would need to be renegotiating. We
Yeah.
had, as you recall, we had removed this out of the operating budget in
Yeah.
2018. So we have not contemplated operationalizing this. I think the amount is closer to 412,000.
That's what we've received year-to-date. Last
Yeah.
year, we received 700.
Yeah.
So we're not, you know, with kind
Yeah.
of where we're at, we're not really sure how much we're going to expect. It's varied a little bit year to year, and I think depending on what they're doing and how much trash
And a
they're
lot of it's being
accepting,
diverted to
right?
Iowa
Yeah.
right now as well, so.
Yeah.
And we do know that the council has provided direction that at the appropriate time, we should start negotiations with BSLI. We've been in touch with them, you know, for over the last couple of years, so.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, remind me, Ms. Rhodey, the host fees, part of that goes into the Ames Center, if I remember.
We put,
Operation.
yep, we did include that in
Yeah.
the Ames Center, and through 2021. And after 2021, there are no either host fees or either of those host fees aren't accounted
Yeah,
for, so.
well, we need to have that discussion simply because I remember when we were looking at funding the Ames Center, one of the things is that Burnsville has been a host to garbage, and people don't see what they get from that. And this was one way to say, we've taken some of that money and we're going to operationalize the Ames Center so that it has money to function. And so people know that, yeah, we've been a host to garbage, but here's something you can see from from those funds.
So if the, whatever the number is, you said year-to-date, we're at about four and some change, so it may end up at maybe 600 for the year or whatever, but whenever that is recognized and is inserted into the budget, City Manager Lee, you mentioned that we had taken that out of the base operations back in 2018. What were we using it for the last couple of years? I can't remember.
The last 2 years, it's gone to the Ames Center
Ames
Fund
Center.
to shore it
Yeah.
up. Prior to that, it was partially in the Ames Center for operations, especially kind of in those early years. It
Yeah.
helped to
Yeah, debt service.
shore that up. And they were in the other, there was two parts. There was the $1 and the $3.33, right? So that $3.33 was in the facilities fund prior to raising the franchise fee. And then prior to that, it was in the general fund.
Yeah,
Gotcha. So it's basically up for
negotiations.
discussion on where, if we solidify that, where do we now want to put it, given the fact that we've shifted Ames in the facility fund and we've done some other things. So it could be applied to the general fund, which would reduce the levy as an annualized number. But we won't have that information in time for our December
Nope.
decision.
Nope.
No.
Oh,
So-
that's a long discussion. I don't know. I have gone through negotiations on those host fees. And then the
Well-
county got a much larger
Yes. Well, my point
amount.
is.
Ours was
Yeah, quite a
so
bit
much
Yeah, we
smaller.
got the short end of that deal. It was, but my question is, if it's through 2021 and January 1st of 2022 is the new cycle, I would hope we'd have that put to bed before January 1st of 2021 or 2022, because are we going to be in a situation where they're dumping garbage and we're not collecting any host because we haven't finalized the contract?
No, we still have a contract
Yeah.
right now.
We expect to continue to collect, there's just gonna be this time where, we're probably still collecting under the
From
old
the
agreement.
old-
We do
Old
continuing
agreement.
resolutions here at the local level too.
On
then.
the old agreement.
So we're gonna continue the contract that runs, I believe you in a prayer meeting had noted that the contract runs through 2021. So, and maybe it's a few months or whatever, but I remember you telling me that because that we were talking about, it was the last budget discussion because we were talking about 2022. I assumed that it was December 31st. Maybe it's a different date, but ultimately, we'll continue to operate under the old agreement until there's a new agreement put in place.
That would be
So
the
the revenue
expectation.
will continue to flow, yet we cannot acknowledge it as part of our budget process because it's not backed up with a continuing resolution.
Yeah, we would recommend not operationalizing
Yeah.
that, but, the council can certainly, we'd be looking for council direction on, how best to use those funds. So that'll be a future discussion,
Yeah.
an upcoming discussion.
Councilmember Gustafson.
Just to add on to what Councilmember Keeley said, are there any restrictions on those funds that when they come to us? And
There's a percentage restriction that part of it has to go into environment.
Sustainability.
Environment.
And, well, we did change to a host fee, and at that time, I believe that 25% restriction was eliminated.
Nice, good, thank you.
So, I think that
I
was in
thought I
2010
heard
when it
that.
went to a host fee versus
Yeah,
the.
what does the legislature have to say about that? Isn't there legislation around all of that host fee and then what goes into environment?
Perhaps, I just know that was the action taken at the time. We changed it from the solid waste fee, I think it was, to the host
fee.
fee. And so we haven't continued to add that 25%
Okay.
to that. Yeah.
All right, and we're good, and so the auditors have looked at that and we're all good. Yeah.
For the last
Yeah, I
10
don't want to
years,
go
yep.
sideways with the state.
Yep.
This has been a long-standing practice. I think it was the tipping fees and host fees, and
That's
then.
right, the tipping
and
fees.
Those, those are statutorily restricted, and then the host fees are not. So we shifted more to the host fees. We'd be happy to send some more information if the council's interested.
Stick with host.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll stick with the host and not do the tipping fees like we did in the past, where that is a restriction, a legislative restriction. Okay. So, first, I want to thank staff, because what you did, you came to us with 5.7. And in 3 weeks, you worked hard to look at all of the budgets from all of the departments, a process that you usually do after the max tax and before we adopt the budget and the levy. You have all that time to look at all of the different departments and their budgets. But you compressed that so that we could have a max tax to consider at the next meeting. And so I want to thank City Manager Lee, Deputy City Manager Lindberg, and you, Ms. Rhodey, and all of the staff members who worked hard to compress that time into 3 weeks, where, usually you have from September to December to get all that work done, to get at this number. So I want to thank you all for that, and that you did some yeoman's work to get us to this. So, members of the council, we need to direct staff to bring back a resolution for 4.8. Councilmember Gustafson.
I'm having a hard time getting around on this 4.8. I still think the 5.7 is where we need to be. I think we need to fund for the future. I'm concerned that if we start lowering this like this, one of these years, we're gonna have a big jump in there, and I'd like to start mitigating that jump now instead of a year or two down the road. So I can't support the 4.8. I can support a 5.7.
Well, 4.8, staff would have, after their process, and we always have a max tax, and then by the time we get to the budget and the levy, they've reduced it. I, like you, believe that, 4.8 isn't going to help us with our staffing pressures, which means that we're going to have amendments as we move forward with all of this. But we need a max tax. Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. Staff has presented 4.8, I think is everything that we need to run this city with that number is likely in there. There are probably some wants that aren't in there. But if staff is comfortable presenting a 4.8 to us confidently, then I'm comfortable accepting a 4.8 as a max tax. So I would motion that we approve the 4.8 as a max tax.
Okay, and we're at a work session, so we just need a consensus.
Not a formal vote.
So says
Yeah.
me.
So, Councilmember Schultz, I don't believe, you've already stated that you don't support a 4.8.
Correct, thank you.
Yes. And Councilmember Gustafson, you don't support the 4.8. Councilmember Keeley.
I am
Yeah,
okay.
different reasons, but yeah.
As I stated in our last budget meeting and to staff, I wasn't comfortable at 5.7, and I was hoping to get something in the 4 range. Ultimately, what that did was cause staff to go back, sharpen their pencils, do a little homework, do some priorities, and priority budgeting based on what they're hearing from this council that is guiding them, and I think they've successfully done that, and I'm okay accepting the 4.8 as is.
Okay. We needed a budget to move forward. You have a consensus of 3.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To move forward with 4.8, because we need a max tax. We cannot not have one. So, City Manager Lee and Deputy City Manager Lindberg, the consensus of the council is 4.8.
Thank
Okay.
you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
City Manager Lee.
I have no other comments, Madam
Okay.
Mayor.
Really, after all that?
Deputy City Manager Lindberg.
No other comments. Thank you for the direction.
It's remarkably quiet tonight.
I think we sucked all the
Okay.
oxygen out of the room.
Thank you. If there are no other items to come before the council, and we are adjourned by acclamation. Okay.